Hi, Jan Parker here, founder and managing director of JPA. When it comes to salary negotiation, it's important to think about two distinct approaches, right? So the one might be where you're interviewing for a new job and there's going to be a negotiation around what you're going to get paid, and the other one is where you've already worked in a certain position for a period of time, and now it comes to reviewing your remuneration or your salary. So let's address the first one. In the first instance, where let's say you're interviewing for a new job, a new role, and now salary negotiation is going to take place. Well, you know, it's always been said that unless you've established value, any price will be too high. So it's clear that you need to do all the usual things you would when you negotiate. You have to really understand whether there's common ground. You really have to do your preparation. You really have to look at yourself from your counterpart's perspective, which means that you really got to do your homework on who it is that you're sitting across the table from being interviewed by. You have to understand what's important to that company. You have to understand what's important to that person. You have to understand what value you can add based on your skill sets and experience to that organization, to that person, to help them to achieve their goals. So you're going to have that discussion first before it comes to the discussion around what you expect to be paid, right? So you're going to have to deliver some value first. Having said that, when it comes to the conversation around what you want to get paid, it's important to keep in mind the impact and the effect of anchoring. Now, you don't necessarily want to do that in a way that's overly assertive, certainly not in an interview where you're looking to establish a long-term relationship. But let's say for argument's sake, the role was going to pay between, let's say, $50,000 and $60,000 a year, depending on your qualification and experience. You might want to anchor the discussion around that salary, saying, look, I realize that the responsibilities associated with this kind of job would normally pay probably in the range of, you know, $60,000 to $65,000. My expectation would be for $59,000 in that context. So why I'm doing it this way is I'm putting a reference point out there. I'm not being demanding, but I am anchoring the discussion, perhaps a little bit above the 60, and I'm also offering a concession. You know, this is probably the expectation, probably what the market expects to be paid in this regard. However, my expectation is slightly lower because you could make the case that I want to establish my value first. I want to give you the opportunity to see how I'm going to add value to your organization, and then perhaps we can get to a conversation, you know, where I can be compensated in line with the results that I deliver for your organization. So that's the first scenario. The second one is where you want to review what you already getting paid. So perhaps you want to have that discussion with one of your you know, people in HR, or perhaps with your direct line manager or boss. Often we feel very uncomfortable when it comes to this conversation. You know, what's our expectation this year? And the reason you feel uncomfortable is because you've probably not managed or framed that conversation on an ongoing basis in a positive way. Let me say this. You have no right to expect an increase in your salary unless you've delivered better results this year than you did the previous year. From your boss's perspective, what does this mean? You have to serve their interests. Often what we do is we disagree with our bosses, we don't deliver what they ask us to deliver, yet we still expect to be remunerated more than we were previously. That makes no sense. It's not a rational argument. Ultimately, the only thing at the end of the day that's going to get you paid more is to deliver better results. So here's what I'm going to suggest you do. If you want to increase your salary, go have a conversation with your boss. This is probably going to blow them out of the water anyway. They're not going to understand what's happening because it's probably happened so seldom. Sit them down and say, look, for the next 12 months, for the next 6 months, whatever remains of your financial targeting area or your financial year, what are your key objectives? Tell me about them, and I'm putting my full effort behind the achievement of those objectives. That's what I'm here to do, put my full energy into that. That would be the basis then to create another conversation. Once you've helped them to achieve all their objectives, you can sit down and say, look, now, based on the achievement of these objectives, I would like to explore ways for us to increase my levels of remuneration. What is it that I can do to deliver enhanced results that's going to give you the justification, the evidence that you need to be able to support me being remunerated better, me being paid more. You want to have that in a collaborative context. This can never be a demand that you make of your immediate superior. They have to be on side it's premised on the fact, or it's rooted in your performance being in line with their interests, what they need to get. If you're constantly arguing with your boss, if you always find yourself in conflict, if you at odds with regards how you want to proceed to achieve your targets, etc., you should not be surprised that you're not going to get an increase in your remuneration. Of course, reciprocity, the principle of reciprocity, is alive and well in those exchanges too. You know, it's a basic trait of human nature that we return to others the form of behavior that they exhibit towards us. So in other words, if I'm not satisfying my boss's interests, what grounds do I give them to satisfy my interests? Particularly if that key interest of mine is to earn more money. If I'm not satisfying their interests, then it's just going to sound like brinkmanship. It's going to sound completely devoid of any good reason if I go ask them to increase my remuneration. So where you've got to start is by understanding what the interests are, satisfying those interests, and that'll create the grounds for you to increase your salary. Hope that helps you to your success.